Good evening. I'm going to guess that it's no surprise to anyone in this room if I said that hunting is generational, which is just a fancy way of saying that hunting as an activity and a lifestyle is passed from one generation to the next, from one family member to the next, older to younger. Well, if that's true, then the spirit of conservation is also generational. And if both of those statements are true, then the ethics that shape our conscience, that guide our decisions and our behavior, those ethics are also passed on from one generation to the next. So we have hunting, conservation, ethics. All of this pay it forward business had to start somewhere. Now, I've never heard of anyone that's actually proclaimed that we as a community have a first family of hunting, conservation, and ethics. But if you look at our history, there is one name that rises above all others. And if you don't know what I'm talking about at this point, I encourage you to pick up one of the flyers that's on your table, take it home with you, read it, but certainly wait until he's done speaking to read it. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm sheep family welcome for Mr. Simon Roosevelt.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Gray. Thanks to the Board of Directors of the Wild Sheep Foundation and the staff. Good evening, everyone. You know, as I wander around the sheep show, I've noticed a lot of quotes, conservation quotes from Theodore Roosevelt. And I wonder if any of you know anything about what he had to say about sheep. But I think right now isn't perhaps the best time to go into those. But if any of you are curious, come find me afterwards, and we'll talk about it. So, good evening again. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight, and thank you for being here. And by that I mean you, all of you here in this room. But equally I mean the larger you, collectively the Wild Sheep Foundation. And I mean here in Reno, and I mean here in North America, in Canada, in the United States, in Mexico, and I mean in the wider world. I mean in the IUCN, I mean in Asia, I mean in Europe. And I hope I haven't left out some other place where you all are working, but it's entirely possible that I have. So thank you again. You already know something about what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. You all know that the number of American hunters has declined and is declining. You've seen or heard that we're down to around 5% of the U.S. population. Thus, our common fear that hunting will end. Participation will die away. Some of the freedoms we have enjoyed since this country's earliest days will be eroded away to nothing. But there's something worse that has already happened. The much bigger group of people in conservation, the ones who are today more widely recognized as leaders in conservation than we are, they don't know us. They don't know anything about us. We're being forgotten while we're still here. They don't know that we founded the conservation movement and that we are driving much of it still today. This is a problem, and it's our problem. Maybe it shouldn't be, but it is. We should be working with these non-hunting conservationists, gaining their support. We need this now. On the one hand, this requires some change. When everyone still knew or remembered what being outdoors really is about, there was no need to explain. And I think if we're honest, we aren't by nature a group inclined to explain ourselves. We aren't used to explaining. On the other hand, you're already doing this. You already gather coalitions around your issues. You're engaging grassroots through programs such as One Campfire. You have an outstanding and incredible youth program. You're headquartered now in one of the world's leading centers of conservation passion, Bozeman. These folks see your common interest in conservation. You've opened doors there to that community. You've probably tapped a few kegs along the way too. That always helps. But that's smart. The rest of the conservation world is big. We could use their help. They need ours, and they can't succeed without us, whether right now they know it or not. Counting hunters and anglers and wildlife watchers all together makes a group of about 40% of the U.S. population. The outdoor industry says the all-in number of Americans going outdoors is nearly 50%. Recruitment, retention, and reactivation is essential, I agree. But this is different. It's bigger, but in some ways it's easier. Toward this objective, to remind and educate this big conservation community for common good, over the last several years I've convened the Conservation Roundtable. This is an occasional gathering of conservation groups, including hunters, notably your Wild Sheep Foundation, and non-hunters. We've met twice on our own, twice with the Secretary of Interior, then Ryan Zinke, and twice now with current Secretary David Bernhardt. And we now have an active list of issues, including two of yours, big game habitat corridors and the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. The entire list includes other issues of importance to us, and also to the campers, hikers, bikers, and paddlers who more commonly represent conservation to the modern world. In working with them, they realize and help us remind the world that hunters created the conservation movement, that we hold knowledge and have experience that is essential to their goals too. And there's something else we can do. The conservation founders did it too. They created a new language for hunting in what they did and what they said. This earned them a leading role in restoring wildlife. It should be easier for us than it was for the founders of conservation, hunters, all of them. By the turning of the 20th century, hunting in America was destroying wildlife. Hunting was open to all at all times and by all means. It was done to supply restaurants and clothing trades and much else. It went full on like this until wildlife was simply too hard to find. All of this was hunting. So they coined the term market hunting. In so doing, the founders not only changed the meaning of the word, but also persuaded society that hunting, which was the problem at the time, would become the solution. By enacting game laws, they redefined hunting and poaching. By creating and publishing the fair chase ethic, they moved hunting away from market slaughter and also made it more than sport. They made hunting into conservation. They were the first to use the term conservation in common talk and print media. And they said fair chase is the ethical, sportsmanlike, and lawful pursuit and taking of any free-ranging wild, big game animal in a manner that does not give the hunter an improper or unfair advantage over the game animals. By creating forest preserves and refuges, limiting harvests, stopping erosion, and funding wildlife agencies, they demonstrated how a personal, often solitary pursuit advanced the conservation of wildlife and habitat, and so was good for the whole of society. Their campaigns against what they called the slob hunting of littering and trespassing and game gluttons demonstrated the honorability and respect of fair chase hunting. Now think of modern hunting today. The founders, mainly men, are gone. But where the great fathers pioneered, we now have great families, all of you, carrying on this work. There are fewer of us, but more kinds of us. And there are more kinds of conservation-curious people to hear us. Hunting itself looks a lot different. The great fathers did it with wool and canvas and leather. We do it in the phenomenal kits of synthetic materials made by people in this room. The weapons and other gear, the science of fitness, all are now more diverse, precise, and effective, also made by people in this room. These innovations and the commitment of their makers to conservation are part of why wildlife restoration has worked and continues to work. But we don't look like the great fathers to the uninformed, and meanwhile conservation challenges have grown. Some game species are overabundant, and others are threatened by overabundant predators. Virtually all non-game species are declining. They don't know what hunting has to offer for these problems. Hunting itself is not part of every solution for these challenges, of course, but hunters can be. For example, we can explain predator control. We understand the importance of all species and the need to sustain them. We know the policies and programs in place, and we can help develop the new ones that are needed. We can hold the movement to a steady direction so the Wilderness Act and the Endangered Species Act don't circle back on us and get in the way of the conservation they're supposed to advance. If we make this connection with non-hunters, they will see us and understand us as the modern hunters who carry the legacy of the originals. Now, this is how our language of today can blaze through the ignorance and nonsense. Today, the uninformed public hears about sport hunting, trophy hunting, canned shoots masquerading as hunting, and others. They don't know what these terms mean, and they can't distinguish them. But we do, and we can. The term sport hunting has got to go. It sounds like we're only in it for the fun and for the kill. We've got to do something about trophy hunting and the term trophy hunting. It should mean more. It should mean going deeper, farther, longer, working harder to find an animal that shows what conservation can produce. I think sheep hunters probably more than any others understand what this means. We talk of hog hunts and other varmint hunts that differ in purpose and practice from what we usually mean by hunting. Culling is a better word that has a conservation meaning. There's an industry of canned shooting that calls itself hunting. We should outlaw this as false advertising. Our own media industry, which prints for and broadcasts to hunters, is visible to non-hunters too. Our broadcast must recognize this and show the conservation at the root of the skills, experiences, and equipment on display. We already have examples of what such change can mean. You have, coalitions on wilderness policy in the Desert National Wildlife Refuge, and access to the Castle Mountains National Monument. These partners are with us because they are coming to appreciate the need for management and also our help in getting it. We have coalitions even on predator control, along with wilderness, one of the most challenging issues. By separating control as necessary management and not hunting, we've made that about ecology. A bipartisan vote in Congress approved predator control of sea lions in the Columbia River estuary, where sea lions were overkilling salmon. In California, the Audubon Society worked with duck hunters to control skunks and other predators that destroy ground nests, ducks and plovers. You are already part of the most powerful communication system that hunting has ever had. Let's use it to better explain, build broad support for what we do, and advance conservation of what we care most about. I hope we'll work together so that your story, and the stories of your corporate sponsors and their professional communicators, is continually refining the words we use and expanding the audiences we reach. It must go out in a new language for modern hunting that restates as brightly today what the fair chase ethic stated a century ago. Our new language must be more specific. It must keep conservation foremost. Fair chase is still the vital force of our passion. It must become our identity again. Thank you all for helping to keep fair chase ethic foremost. The Wild Sheep Foundation is and can be a powerful partner in defining modern hunting. You, all of us, should be equally recognized as conservation by walking into a room as when you show up in the field to move sheep or improve habitat. Our language, spoken, written, filmed, can explain exactly, consistently, that hunting is an honorable ethic, an expert skill set, and an indispensable part of conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon, for your inspirational words, for your wisdom. Thank you for what you do for conservation all around the world. I think you and I first met in St. Petersburg, Russia. But conservation happens all over. Wild Sheep Foundation is first and foremost a conservation organization. Conservation is who we are. Conservation is what we do. And we'd like to welcome you as a new life member of the Wild Sheep Foundation.